Hey,
Get the
Lance,
brain.
how are you?
I'm great, Rich. How you doing?
Good. I'm really well. So glad you're here. I know everybody's been looking forward to this presentation. I know I really have as well. I'm excited to introduce Lance Todd, the owner of Barefoot Science. So Barefoot Science Insoles is a company that I have personally been working with. It's a company that I believe in. It's a product that I've used. Matter of fact, my quick story before we get to you, Lance, is when I first put them in my golf shoes, I was amazed at how far and straight my ball went. So I play with golf with guys younger than me, and as it turned out, I ended up driving the ball a good 10, 15 yards further than they were. So they were pretty surprised by that. And then when I had my personal experience with that, I said, well, I'm going to get my daughter wearing them. Both my daughters play basketball. One plays in college and one plays in high school. And I have them both wearing Barefoot insoles. My older daughter is now up to a level 4, and which you'll learn more about when in Lance's presentation. But my one daughter's up to a level 4. She has an ankle sprain in over a year. So it's been truly an amazing product. I'm super excited to have you present to the audience more information about Barefoot Science and how they can really get a hold of the product. So thanks for being here. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, great, Rich. Thanks. Thank you very much for the invite. Let me launch the share screen.
Yep, lower left.
Yep. And share.
Yep. Perfect. And load the PowerPoint.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Awesome.
Slideshow in the beginning.
Beautiful. I'll be back after your, and you can see that little thing in the middle. It says hide yet. Perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome. Take it away, my friend. We'll see you in a little bit.
Great. Thanks, Rich. Thanks for joining us this morning. And before I start, the presentation that we're putting forward today is kind of a condensed educational piece. We will be having the full educational piece with the medical information loaded onto our booth site at the LER arena as well. This presentation is going to be focused a little bit on how Barefoot Science works and a little bit heavier on the outcomes, which is I know is where everybody lives, is in patient outcome, which drives obviously customer retention and referrals and happiness of the client. So thank you once again. So we're going to introduce a new approach in the management of the foot and the upper and lower limb pathomechanics. What do Barefoot Science insoles do to the foot, brain, and posterior muscle groups? Obviously, you see the man walking, and now we stimulate the 400,000 nerve endings in the foot. It nourishes the brain with the somasensory information that it looks for by accessing the body's natural proprioceptive system. The gait, posture, movement becomes more efficient, and enhanced proprioception delivers better balance, timing, and muscle coordination, which is mandatory for efficient movement and posture alignment. The system feeds the entire posterior chain, so it's not just triggering the feet, it's triggering the posterior chain, including issues such as hip and pelvis, back issues, paraspinals. So moving on to, we've worked for 3 years with the top podiatrist in the United Kingdom, a gentleman by the name of Neil Frame. He did a study with 1,000 of the NHS patients he gave them the option of traditional orthotics that they prescribe over Barefoot Science at no charge. The Barefoot Science, they charge 70 sterling. And Neil had a 99% conversion rate of those patients. I asked him how he did that and convinced them to reach to their pocket for 70 sterling. And he said, I simply told them that Barefoot Science will restructure the foot and allow it to become self-supportive again versus permanent bracing. 100% of the 85% of patients came back in for follow-up reported positive results. The NHS, there's a 30-page document online that they summarized stating that Barefoot Science, quote, resupinated the foot and allowed it to become self-supportive again. So it's really as simple as that. Obviously, there's a lot of connective issues to the fact that the foot's been resupinated and that the posterior chain is now also being nourished. Proprioceptive and neuromuscular considerations of Barefoot Science. Again, our technology, is truly termed disruptive technology because it's a complete different approach to treating the foot and lower and upper limb based on rehabilitating the system rather than accommodating. So Barefoot Science capitalizes on both the mechanical properties of this key area of the foot as well as the neuromuscular properties of the sole. Some people have called proprioception or more so a subset of proprioception is something called stretch reflex. Stretch reflex is the natural system that triggers the tendons and ligaments around a joint at 700 miles an hour. The brain recognizes that the ankle is about to go over or the ACL is about to tear. And what it does is it instantly shortens all the ligaments and tendons around that joint. Olympic coaches like Ned Amendola have indicated to me that we've eliminated 50% of the injuries of the Olympic athletes. I personally experienced it. I played squash every morning for 25 years at 7 o'clock in the morning. I used to roll 2 to 3 times a month on my ankle. I had my brain trained to actually roll rather than blowing my ankle out. The first week I'm wearing the insoles, I was about to roll. As you know, when you're into injury mode, everything slows down into isolation stage. And I looked down, I actually watched my ankle correct itself in 100th of a second. It weirded me out for the entire day. I haven't rolled in 15 years. For Star Trek fans, we simplify it in stating to the athletes the term that they use, Scotty, the force fields are down. So we simply flip that switch and turn it back on again. What are the benefits of increased muscle strength, the spring effect of muscles? Once again, there's a lot of medical data here and more in the other presentation, but the bottom line is that stronger arch muscles can control arch deflection more effectively, reduce the strain on the plantar fascia, and help re-establish integrity during push-off enhanced propulsion. When we talk about stored energy, the easiest term that was described to me to describe that was simply to take an elastic band and stretch it out, right? That's what happens when you trigger the foot muscles. It turns on the windlass effect, raises the arch, activates the musculature. The shortening of the elastic demonstrates the energy that's in that elastic, and the same as the body, and allows it to provide the other functionality segments of body, of posture and movement. My journey with working with technology companies, it goes back 15 years. I've always been very focused on looking at technology to quantify what Barefoot Science does for the individual. So we worked with SAMG, a gentleman by the name of Dave Lemke, Dave is one of those geniuses that he studied under Vladimir Yonda 20 years ago and has continued working in the area of integrated muscle firing and understanding EMG to a much deeper level. But we'll get into some of his reports a little bit later on. But the bottom line is there's very strong evidence that supports enhanced proprioception. Significance of inefficiencies in the base support. We've all seen these images, and what a lot of people seem to not understand is the importance, the full degree of importance of the feet or the foundation. So many people will treat the isolated areas, as an example, the knees. You see the curve or the angle there, which highlights shin splints, up into the rotational issues of the hips, which tie together with, again, all the muscle firing, such as the hip flexors. So what our product does is rehabilitates the foundation, turns on the kinetic chain. So we end up with examples like this, where the non-symmetrical firing and synchronization produces misalignment issues in the joints. Over time, we train the foot and teach the body to run symmetrically. So now the synchronized firing of key co-contractions across the joints produces stabilization and enhanced alignment. And many of you, I'm sure, have seen these types of hash marks. I think Dr. Vasily was one of the higher end orthotic groups that relied heavily on these types of hash marks and did a great explanation of what the overpronation issues caused throughout the kinetic chain. The only difference with what we're looking at here is, one, there's muscle initiation, not just a rebracing or reposting, but if you take a look at the image on the right, you will see that it is naked. There's no device, no barefoot science underneath. The foot has been retrained to be symmetrical. Evidence of pressure distribution. Again, in almost all cases, and I'll show you an example a little further on in the presentation, we see an instant move to forefoot grip once we initialize the proprioceptive system. Many of the so-called barefoot runners or minimalistic runners, what they don't realize is that they're basically giving the job back to the foot, but without the proprioceptive stimulus, they're still resting on the heel on landing point, as you see in the 2011 image. Main advantages, again, we can go through these issues, but it's the bottom line is that it encourages foot strengthening and therefore encourages the transition to being barefoot or to minimalistic shoes. Our position on minimalistic shoes is that, yes, we agree that everybody should be in a minimalistic shoe that allows the body to function as it was designed, but not until they're ready. And I won't go into the details that we've captured in the education that the gait reports have given us, but in majority of the cases when we see a runner move to a forefoot landing position or midfoot, they actually land midfoot. Because the system isn't on, they're wearing minimalistic shoes. The body goes 80 milliseconds in reverse and then goes forward again. That's where the injury rates that you read about online are coming from. There is no reverse in walking or running. So they might as well, if the system is shut off, they might as well land on their heel and go forward. Measured outcomes. Again, this is really where I've been living for 15 years. We have over 2 million happy clients, and more so it's the education of learning why we were so successful with those clients. So, there's different ways that we can check measured outcomes. This is one way, using a gait system that uses, we We admire Jacqueline Paris. She's the goddess of gait. But there's other methods of doing measured outcomes without an investment in technology that we'll get into in further on in the presentation. So the world is pushing heavily, the insurance companies and the people, to move to measured outcome clinics, both in sport training and in the practitioner world. The bottom line, the reports are saying that the youth, which they define as 18 to 34, are screaming for measured outcomes. This age group grew up with iPhones, and I have granddaughters that expand at 1 year old on my iPhone, scroll, send, call me directly for FaceTime. It's crazy. So that market is looking and screaming for measured outcomes. So how does your practice provide that? Right. The simplest way is using a standard that's been accepted since 1986 and accepted globally for measuring balance. It's called the Shumway Cook Horak CTSIB clinical study, right? And the test, what it involves is standing on one leg with your eyes open for about 60 seconds. Then you repeat the process on the opposite leg, and then repeat the test with the eyes closed. The goal here is to reach 1 minute per foot with your eyes closed. With our athletes, then we get to that stage, then we put them on a sponge mat to throw more at the brain, get them up to 1 minute, and then we put them on an upside down Bosu ball, and they get up to 1 minute. That's balance. But if you Google the Shumway Cook test, you'll find almost every country accepts this, because what it's basically doing is checking to see how the patient or athlete's brain is managing the tripod of sensory data that it looks for with every step. And that tripod consists of the eyes, the inner ear of the vestibula. That's why when you get an earache, you lose your balance. And the feet, right, which is designed to trigger those 400,000 nerve endings barefoot in the sand or grass. What our patents simply do is provide that stimulus, noxious irritation of the foot, to activate the fight or flight process of that third leg. So, without proprioceptive stimulus, it's impossible to reach your peak performance. And as we're younger, we learn to compensate for this deficit. As we get older, we are not so good at compensating, and that's why the falls begin to happen. Dr. Gorman refers to this phase of operating with only two legs of the tripod as being drunk. Drunk means dramatically reduced utilization of normal kinematics. So now we move on to footplate technology. This was an example that was run by the Naraxin technical team at a seminar that we held some years back. Lowell was an individual who came to the seminar with his Vibram 5 fingers on. Lowell's a triathlete. He's a professor at the Canadian Naturopathy College, and he runs a sports clinic up in Huntsville, Ontario. So Lowell arrived at the seminar, and I could see that he's got his Vibram 5 fingers on, but he's in head forward position with his pointer finger resting in front of his leg. I said, Lowell, why don't you have the insoles in? He said, Lance, I don't need them. I've got my Vibrams on. Is that right? So we put level 3 in, walked him for 300 steps, and these are the results. Right. The biggest thing that we look at, as anybody that has a foot plate knows, is the postural sway numbers, the center of path, which is the measurement around the circle that you see in the images above. In Lowell's case, pre-Barefoot Science, his path length was 1,440 millimeters. 300 steps later, and the only interface was Barefoot Science, his path length was down to 701, which is a 50% reduction in wasted movement with every stride that he takes and a doubling of balance. We look at his posture. Again, it now became upright, right? And the other significant point with Lowell was there was an instant move to forefoot grip, or as they said, use of the first med head. So instantly the foot had now moved to a forefoot grip, and which is the holy grail for runners to activate the forefoot. So we look at that, that technology, which everybody is familiar with for decades, underfoot mapping, and we want to figure, well, how do we, when I first saw the underfoot mapping technology back in 2004, my question to the doctor that was presenting the images, I asked him, what am I looking at here? I see a foot on the screen that's 95% red, a little bit of blue and green underneath where the arch is, which is where the oxygen's getting in. So he said, I'm kind of a simple man. Can you explain to me what we're looking at? And he said, basically we're looking at the intrinsic muscles of the foot have collapsed. The foot is now flat. So the heat sensor in the device is picking up the red. Little blue and green is the heat or the area where there's no heat and the air is getting in. And he went on to explain how this is going to create issues in the ankle, the knees, and the hips. I said, well, hold on, so back up a second. I'm still stuck on the point that the 40 intrinsic muscles have collapsed. And we're going into the symptoms that are caused by that. And my question to him was, well, why don't we rehabilitate the muscle? So we do in all other parts of the body since the early 1900s. His comment was that we don't do that. And my comment was, that's what I do. And we have a patented product and hundreds of thousands of results that we actually resupinate. So how do we repurpose or expand the use of the existing foot plates? We all know that in extreme cases that bracing of any joint is mandatory until the problem is under control. So what we give your clinic the option to do is to still, on extreme cases, brace the foot for the 6 to 8 week period that's traditional in stabilizing an injured joint. And then we can introduce a solution that progressively strengthens and rehabilitates the feet in the posterior chain while nourishing the brain with a sensory feedback while still providing the traditional benefits instead of immobilizing the feet for advanced foot problems. Just like the industry has moved from prescribing a permanent cast to a walking cast, their program may now include initial bracing while you gently begin to add progressive exercise into the athlete's rehabilitative program. From a patient perspective, what we recommend and we see with many of our practitioners is that because Barefoot Science is progressive, we see a change to the kinetic chain that is gradual, just like any other exercise program of going to the gym. So what we recommend as the body realigns, and while it's realigning, it may need additional treatments that you all are good at, such as fascial release. So if the joints are restricted, we're turning the muscles on, musculoskeletal, it's affecting the change, but the reason that we love prescribing the product through practitioners such as yourselves is that we know that there's symptoms that need to be cleaned up at the same time. So by treating the cause and the symptoms in harmony, that's where you get these miracle quote results. And unfortunately, you'll need to book 7 meetings with that patient as they go through each stage. These numbers here Back to the Jacqueline Paris method of checking gait. My history, and journey with technology, say, began, 15 years ago. Each of those slide segments represents multiple years of my life that we worked with the technology companies. We still work with companies that do underfoot mapping and SEMG, but I found that all of these imbalances and the Shumway Cook balance test all showed up in dynamic gait movement in a 3-minute capture, and it was a lot easier for the patient and coach to understand, where the benefits are. Looking at these globally accepted standards, this report and technology has been used in over 1,000 peer-reviewed studies. But by looking at each of the parameters, that is the coordination aspect of what we look at as balance, timing, and coordination. And what coordination means is coordination of the entire kinetic chain. So Uncle Fred, the hip flexor, is getting along with Aunt Sally, the peroneus longus. If you make one change, do they all get along? That will all show up in these reports. The two of the key areas that we look at, and it may seem confusing at first when you look at all these numbers, but it's really quite simple. Single leg support is balance. This is the stage where you're in one leg without compensation, or help from the other leg for stabilization. So running, people don't realize the importance of balance. Running is basically pure balance. You're always on one leg in single support phase or swing phase with no way to compensate. So balance is captured under single leg support and swing phase. In these numbers, 0 to 5% is in the green zone, 5 to 10% we're getting worried. The U.S. Olympic Committee shuts you down at 9%, and over 10, it's known through studies that you're going to break. These numbers are representing the asymmetry in the right-left. And one of the great things I was taught and stuck was simply that asymmetry equals injury. So, but not only is asymmetry the cause of injury, it's also the cause of the inability to hit peak performance. An efficient machine runs faster with less energy. The second screen is load response. Load response is the phase when you're on one leg and the rotational issues are going on in the hip and pelvis, managing the propulsion stage. The Israeli military did a study with the same equipment, and they determined that load response was the single greatest pre-indicator of injury, anything over 11.5%. All of the soldiers injured. So this is a 3-month client that only used Barefoot Science as the interface. So it was February, now we're into March. The numbers have dropped almost by 50% to 8.8% differential. So we're now in the yellow zone, and the load response made a remarkable improvement to 3.6%. Load response is also directly tied to overpronation and lack of balance. Third month, we're down to 3.9%. Still, a ways to go. Load response is almost perfect, down to 1.3%. These are the types of results that the patient and the insurance companies are looking for. They'll pay for this type of information all day long. In fact, we work with Neil Frame, the gentleman that worked, the NHS podiatrist. He had a call from Bupa Insurance in Europe, and they offered him double the pay, per patient visit if he used infrared technology, which is this technology, because it's showing progressive improvement. So we're looking here at the best, what we call the best kept secret in the evolution of treatment of mechanics. Again, we're looking at underfoot mapping, and a lot of the issues that we've had over the years is really, how do we take a complex situation, what happens with proprioception, and simplify it? So a lot of our running stores and practitioners post this poster up in their lobby, simply to show them why you're prescribing barefoot science. So if you look at the girl, and we ask the patient, does she look to be in good shape? And most people say yes, she does. But the reality is that I almost didn't use her as a model because of, like the earlier slide you saw, you see that her feet are pronated, knees are twisted in, the left hip is dropped, and the right shoulder is dropped. And this is the reason the numbers that you see on the right side was a study that I did with the Toronto East General Hospital for 40 ER nurses and doctors. That was back when we were changing the plugs once a week. We now realize that we should take 3 weeks in between each level, as that's how long it takes to build muscle in any type of an exercise program. But the stats on the right were the numbers that came at the end of their shift. With these nurses, we had a 33% drop in foot pain, 30 ankles, lower legs 30, knees 42.9, hips 19, lower back 34, upper back 21, shoulders 38.9, and overall fatigue was dropped by 22.7%. If the drug companies had a drug that did this, it'd be front page billion-dollar news. And for me, the only explanation is that when you take the feet in their pronated position and how that foundation affects the chain, and you strengthen the feet, those are the same feet, after 12 weeks, the body realigns, takes the stress off the joints and the associated pain. I had 40 of the U.S. Olympic track athletes. We went into 40 of the athletes, including guys like Gatlin and Tyson Gay and Will Clay. And I thought, what's going to happen when we turn the proprioceptive switch on to these people that are gold level athletes? The number one comment that they came back with out of over a couple of weeks was that their training pain had disappeared. I said, guys, why do you keep bringing up the training pain? He said, Lance, since we were 12, the amount of pain that we go through when we're getting ready for an event such as this has been unbelievable. So the only thing that I can attribute that to is the fact that we made the body more efficient. We know that we turned the muscles on, moved the key posterior muscles into symmetrical firing and more robust, and eliminated the imbalances in the joints. Symmetry in muscle firing. Dave Lemke, again, who studied with Vladimir Yonda, when I first met him at a performance seminar on proprioception in LA, right, he said, what's interesting, Lance, is where you trigger is where I trigger for scoliosis patients. So sure enough, when he did his first test, we saw an increase of 35% in the paraspinals. So that from a scoliosis patient is invaluable. But this is a typical, and we have hundreds of them. After 6 weeks of using Barefoot Science, you can see in the initial phase, the left glute was not even firing, and the hamstring was firing intermittently. We hear this from almost every athlete that they have a favorite side. Barefoot Science triggers the glutes and the posterior chain. And after 6 weeks, Lemke found that there's a much more robust contraction pattern across all monitored muscles, but more importantly, symmetrical contractions of the hamstrings, paraspinals, and glutes. As Dave said, honestly, if I could bring about this type of change in manual therapy and exercise, folks would flock to my seminar. In every case, there was a leveling of the posterior shift in the pelvis, presumably related to increased hamstring tone, and reduced forward head was observed. This forward head or posture changes, at one point we had 50%, and they still may be wearing them, of the PGA Golf Tour players. What the Titleist Performance Review Board was astounded with was that we actually brought about posture without thinking, because we trigger the parasympathetic side of the brain, which activates the chain. So many of the golfers would lose their alignment around the 14th hole. With Barefoot Science, it's maintained. The McBee testimonies, won't bore you reading the whole thing, but the bottom line is that Barefoot Science, we love working with the Olympians and high-end athletes, but our bigger goal is really to work with the everyday person and allow them to continue doing whatever they want to do until they're 95. So, in Roger's case, he had to stop running. As he said, for the first time in years, he put the insoles in, the feet felt planted, right? And after a couple of weeks, he was confident that he could get up again to running, not full distance that he was doing of 40 miles per week, but somewhere close to that. And that really is our goal is to keep people running, teach them how to retrain their body for balance and movement, and be able to do simply what they like to do, whether it's hiking, running, playing sport, into their 90s. Michael Olden, he's one of 3 triple board certified orthotists in the U.S. military. I met Michael. He sent us this testimony, and I had to call him and ask him to add to it that I didn't put words in his mouth. It was so incredible. The part that really got to me through Michael's testimony was that he stated that since using Barefoot Science, it's turned his clinic into a healing clinic. Issues such as plantar fasciitis, hammer toes, patella, IT band syndrome, all miraculously treated. And the biggest part with Michael, was that the soldiers stopped complaining about the pain. Mike has registered. He uses foot plate technology as well, but he's registered a 97.6% success rate in clearing plantar fasciitis, the biggest foot problem that's presented to practitioners around the world. And the reason is that we simply address the key cause of plantar fasciitis, and that's participation of the 40 intrinsic foot muscles. With those foot muscles not engaging, load gets shifted to the plantar fascia, which is not designed to manage 100%, perhaps 30%, becomes overloaded, you get inflammation and micro tears. We simply rehabilitate those muscles and get them engaging once again. The plantar fascia rehabilitates and stays in a rehabilitated strong mode. So as Mike, he was probably the top doctor in the military, or by his claim, at producing custom orthotics. And as you can see at the bottom, he's now gotten away from bracing the feet, causing additional weakness and instability, to strengthening the feet progressively while you walk. He still prescribes and custom designs orthotics in addition to Barefoot Science. Dr. Gorman, again, I think many of you may be familiar with Dr. Gorman. He holds 7 patents on the heart rate monitors, with the Polar and whatnot. He also co-invented the Optigate system that's been used in over 1,000 peer-reviewed studies. So there's no doubt that Doc knows what he's doing. I think he has more athletes under his care than Nike. The first person that he tested with, when I talked to him, he asked me if we had data. As you know from now, that I have probably too much data and perhaps irritating at some point. But he asked me for the data that would demonstrate that we trigger the feed and nourish the brain. My comment to him was that, Doc, you're a scientist. You're not going to believe my data. You're going to do your own testing. He said, you're right. The first patient that he tested was a pontine stroke patient that was told at Christmas time, this is now June, that he would never walk or talk again. And he brought him in June. In 12 minutes, he brought him from 28% asymmetrical to 4% asymmetrical using Barefoot Science and what's called the second screen of the OptiGate system, which allows you to retrain the cognitive aspect of gait. But what his comment was that he was absolutely fascinated how quickly the accommodative process is if given the right information. For this, we have been directing our patients to walk while we give them biofeedback in each of the parameters. Dave Lemke, once again, his conclusion was, as they commented on at the Titleist Performance Review Board, he believes that the insoles or the enhanced proprioception cross-trains the body out of the core bias that underlies the multitude of inefficiencies and subtle imbalances. I believe it literally completes the upright posture circuit and brings about posture without effort. That brings us to the end of our presentation. Many people would like to try the product. As I mentioned earlier, our preference is not to sell them direct. It's to sell them through qualified practitioners such as yourself so that you can monitor the symptoms in conjunction with triggering the feed and turning the system back on. So if you mention this, that you've seen this presentation, we will happily give you the 45% discount, which is the distributor discount that you get on a full-time basis for your clinic for buying just one, or you want to treat your family or co-workers, you can buy 2 or 3, where traditionally we have a 20 minimum insole ordered to become a distributor and receive the 45% discount. That 20 pairs just gives you enough that you've got 2 pairs of each size, so you're not out of stock as soon as you've sold your first pair or grabbed your first pair. That brings the presentation to a conclusion. These slide presentations will be loaded up on the LER Arena platform, as well as the longer, more educational-based piece. And obviously our email address was on there, and we welcome any questions that you have. Please bring them forward, and we'll schedule a time to talk. Again, thank you.
Awesome job, Lance. Stop screen sharing.
Yep. Do.
Perfect. Really great. I think one of the things that I want to stress with you and obviously the audience, more importantly, is one of the reasons that I think I've used this product and have given it to my family and friends, and have recommended it to colleagues of mine that play basketball and so forth, is the fact that there is data behind the product. There is supportive clinician results showing the effectiveness for given conditions. One of the things that's amazing to me is when my daughter, who's had chronic ankle injuries from playing basketball since she was 5 and is now playing in college, has not suffered one ankle sprain since wearing the product. So I'd love for you to speak to that, because that wasn't in the presentation. The value of using the product as it relates to preventing ankle sprains. We're in an era where we want to prevent injury. most of what's happened now is a reaction to an injury, right? So here's an injury. Here's how we treat the injury. What about creating that awareness that there are products such as Barefoot Science that can help prevent injury? I would love for you to speak to that for a minute.
Yeah, we did touch a bit in the presentation on that. That's what's called stretch reflex, and as I say, that's only one aspect of the benefits of proprioception. The doctors that I work with are continually coming up with other musculoskeletal benefits that are built into proprioception. Mm-hmm. People say, well, this complicated explanation of proprioception, it really isn't that complicated. Mm-hmm. I refer to it as the man behind the curtain, mm-hmm. the 900-pound gorilla in the tree. The doctors will continually find new benefits. So even if you Google the effect of lack of proprioception, you'll find probably 4 screens of arm's length peer-reviewed studies that detail what happens to the body without proprioception. We're simply the what now. That's mm-hmm. all our product does. So with stretch reflex, instantly, I told you, within a week, I immediately stopped going over the ankles. Mm-hmm. We have another girl a physical therapist in Italy. She trained this guy in June. He was going over on his ankles 20 times a day, is what she said. I can send you the testimony. Put the insoles in, the ankles roll stopped immediately. Mm-hmm. And what I got a kick out of that guy is that he went on in September to do a 360-kilometer race, which is kind of out of my brain. But he had 0 ankle rolls, and he wore the same shoes as he wore in the race the year before. Last year, the shoes wore out in the heel. This year, they wore out in the midsection, and he moved up 100 places to 166 out of 1,000. And the only real thing that he changed was the Barefoot Science.
Yeah. And, obviously basketball being, personal to me, given that I play and given that both my daughters, my boys have all played. Talk a little bit about the results that you saw from the Greek national team. I think those results were pretty fantastic as well.
Yeah. Costas was the head of the team at the time, and we sent him some samples over, and again, we can send you his written testimony. What he found was that for the first time in team's history, that they had 0 plantar fasciitis and 0 Achilles tendon issues. And probably more important or equal importance, was that the players showed a 2-inch additional jump height mm-hmm. after 1 day of wearing the product. Yeah. So we find in most cases people like to focus more on performance than they do injury mm-hmm. Rehabilitation. So any of the doctors working with teams, it just becomes part of the package that they bring to the table now.
Exactly. And then, aside from the sports side, I mean, obviously we've heard about, the value of using Barefoot Science as a runner, in terms of speed and, performance enhancement as well as injury reduction. But I think what also I'd love to hear you elaborate a little bit on is what we saw with fall risk prevention, as well as some of what you saw, what Dr. Gorman experienced when it comes to treating stroke patients. I think we underestimate the value of strengthening the foot and how strengthening the foot can help with these other conditions as well. So I'd love for you to speak to that also.
Well, and it's not so much to me, the miracle or the man behind the curtain aspect of proprioception. What amazes me, I mean, people tell me all the time that our product is a miracle. Mm-hmm. I tell them it's not a miracle. What is a miracle is how intelligent the body is. And the fact that the 400,000 nerve endings in the feet, like really, Nobody talks about this, right? That is the actual breaker switch. So when you look at any issue, neuromuscular problem, which is so devastating to the individual, stroke is a neuromuscular issue.
Mm-hmm.
So you think that if we turn on the neural switch that nourishes the brain with the data for movement in somebody that has a neuromuscular issue will benefit? Of course they will.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's a natural, but why has it been ignored?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you go back, everybody quotes Leonardo da Vinci back in 1411, stating that the foot is an engineering masterpiece, a work of art. It's made out of 250 moving parts and all this stuff. They still use it today, but they don't put in that there's 400,000 nerve endings, right? That's the magic. So learning, how proprioception helps your patient, you will continue to learn. And why I love data so much is that the data, to me, is the best teacher, right? Because without the data, you're guessing, right? The eye can only see down to 16% asymmetry. We know we break it at 10. So it's impossible to do a gait or movement assessment without technology. If you can do a gait assessment and see down to 0.2%, I'd love to meet you, right? So it just really gives you the tool.
Yeah, I think you also spoke to, when you're looking at a patient, you can't analyze their gait because you don't have the data. So when you're using, whether it's a pressure mat or OptoGate system or any type of technology, you're able to prove the outcome, right? You're able to validate the outcome. And I think that's a lot of what's missing. But in the orthotic space, right? There's a lot of what's missing. So you have the pre and post data to support the claims that you make about the product, which frankly I've experienced personally, my family's experienced personally, and my friends have experienced personally. So it's a really amazing product. I'm grateful to have learned about it. I hope more people see this event and recognize the value of proprioception and strengthening the foot and decreasing or increasing muscle activation, turning on the glutes, flipping the switch, all those things you talked about that are typically not addressed in the medical community.
Yeah. And again, technology is great. I mean, I love it because it's like putting a microscope and shows you stuff you haven't seen. But even the simple Shumway Cook test, again, that's been accepted since 1986. If we're testing shoes as an example, we just check a runner or patient barefoot. What are your numbers? Shut your eyes. If you put the shoes on and the balance number decreases, it's the wrong shoe, right? In the same way with the training. So now, as I say, you can test the patient in your practice, and if they cannot stand on one foot with their eyes closed for 15 seconds, they have a balance problem. It's tied together with all the performance and fall issues. So you can start with something as simple as that. And again, once you realize that, we can show you, how to use a standard slant board to take it to the next level and determine where that athlete at what stage of gait they're shaky and solid. And that where the shaky becomes the ongoing treatment.
I think you just brought up a great point, and that's how I sort of learned a little bit more about the technology and how it works. And when I speak about technology, I speak about the Barefoot science system because it is not technology in the forms of technology like this technology, but it is a technological advancement. And when I went down to Dr. Gorman's office, and and he had us step on a slant board and pronation, supination, and where your balance is, stand on 2 feet, stand on 1 foot and close your eyes, and it was amazing to me because I consider myself to be in pretty good shape. Right, I don't get injured. I'm in good shape, and I couldn't balance on 1 foot with my eyes closed for more than 2.5 seconds. And then we were able to put the insole in, a little bit of gait training, and the next thing you know, I was balancing for 10 seconds. So it's truly amazing. I think before we end, I wanted you to really explain as best you can, right, the actual product, because it's an insole. It comes in the box. Have one. Show the audience exactly what we're talking about, because it's hard for someone to believe and really see what we're talking about. So, so I think this is really helpful.
So this is a 3/4 length insole.
Yeah.
And again, the patents are based on the dome.
Yeah.
So just like any other exercise program, this is the series of plugs that goes in. Mm-hmm. So think of these as like weights at the gym. So each time you move, and again, we used to do once a week, or we would say once you no longer feel it because the muscles have reformed around that stimulus, we now realize it takes 3 weeks to build solid muscle. So we start with level 1 of the plug, which you can see is very thin. Mm-hmm. It goes into the arch of the foot, and we tell most people to wait for 3 weeks. Children can move ahead faster because their bodies react to exercise and stimulus so much faster. So now you see level 2, and we get you up to a level 6, which is now silicone, meant for more permanent and stimulates a wider section. And then there's a level 7. Mm. A lot of people want to know, well, are we reliant on this for our life, or can we stop? Mm-hmm. And I used to say to them, well, if you go to the gym, it's only an exercise program, and you get in great shape. Do I get to stop? Yeah. I wish. Right? But
exactly.
And I said it before, like, if I could find somebody that manufactured a shirt that fired my ab muscles every time I wore it, that's all you'd see in my closet, right? Yeah. But the reality is, once the education is there and you realize that proprioception is mandatory. I had one scholar tell me, Lance, what you're doing isn't new. He said, if you look up in the first year medical book of all practices, whether it's physical therapy, chiropractic, RMT, there's a whole section on neuromuscular proprioceptive necessity to activate musculatures. He said, if you want to know what you're doing, it's not that complicated. Just have them go back and read that section. Mm-hmm. He said somehow they've forgotten that section, and now they can justify permanently insulating, and bracing the feet. But what you do is explained in that first section of the books.
Yeah, exactly. And so, the fact that people can now see the insole and the system and what it is, do you want to just address, are there any contraindications? Are there any situations where a patient, might not benefit from it? I'm sure that's a question that the audience has. So maybe speak to that just for a moment, and then I have one more question, and then I think we can.
Sure. Well, our product comes with a 100% money-back guarantee. If we don't reach our claims, we'll happily replace it. But to your point, in cases, I'd say less, there's a percentage of cases where when you introduce exercise, there's an adverse reaction. So a lot of doctors over the years have used our product to help identify the muscle groups that are injured. Mm-hmm. So when I hear somebody is having a problem, quite often what I'll do is tell them just to take out the plugs altogether and start with, even though it's just a small, soft dome, right? It's a cork-based material, but it flattens out. It still provides a minimal amount of proprioception. But if there's a problem, if you went to the gym and you started doing a bicep curl, the right arm hurt. Mm-hmm. Would you say, oh, darn, I'm never going to do that again? No, you go to the doctor, and the doctor finds out why there's a problem with engaging the muscles through an exercise program. So we tell them to stop advancing, get the problem treated, and once again, why I prefer dealing with practitioners, and then begin the exercise program again.
Yep.
Same thing we've been doing for close to 100 years.
Yeah. So we know it works great with runners. We know it works great with basketball players, all types of athletes. We know it works on patients with stroke. How about the diabetic patient, the neuropathic patient?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's one of my great passions is the diabetic world, neuropathy. Uh, outside peer studies have proven that atrophy is present before clinical peripheral neuropathy. We've known for 100 years that cushioning, supporting, and bracing of musculature causes atrophy.
Mm-hmm.
So, and if you look at the diabetic guidelines by any government, it states not to restrict movement of the body and restrict circulation and blood flow. Bracing does all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
What our product does is in line with all diabetic guidelines. We stimulate, we activate, right? And as you get more into it, you'll find, there's a muscle in the largest muscle in the calf is the soleus. In order for the soleus to be activated, it's tied to the 40 intrinsics.
Mm-hmm.
So instantly we increase the activation not just of the feet, but also the soleus muscle.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, our top product, the Therapeutic Plus, is treated with a product called Celliant. Celliant is approved, I forget the term they use, with the FDA to increase blood flow and circulation.
Mm-hmm.
So, not only does the product activate the venous system, it also provides infrared technology that increases blood flow and circulation. And it's $130. For me, a diabetic, the great thing with the diabetics is that I find that they shy away from products that are diabetic based.
Mm-hmm.
And the bottom line with our Therapeutic Plus, increasing blood flow and circulation equals decreased fatigue and faster recovery time. That's what they dope for. The only difference is that our system is legal. So now we can go to a diabetic and say, this is the same system that we use on our Olympic athletes. By the way, it's beneficial from a diabetic perspective.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I think I know it's a great product. I wear it. My family wears it. My friends wear it. I think also one of the values in this, and I know you spoke to the discount for the clinician, not based on any volume, but I think if you're a clinician and you're in this space and you're treating any kids all the way up to geriatrics, I think this is a first line of treatment. They come in with plantar fasciitis. And not only that, if you're helping your patients, they tell people. And I think it just becomes a viral effect. I know I think we have probably 30 or 40 of people that I know and friends of mine and colleagues of mine that are wearing the device now. And unequivocally, everybody has seen the benefits. So, I really was excited for this opportunity because I want the world to know about what it is that Barefoot Science is all about, commitment, and that, you have the data to support the things you're saying. It's not like made up.
Yeah. And to your point, we find that the average Barefoot Science user has 4 to 6 pairs. Mm-hmm. Once they realize how effective they are, they want them in every shoe.
Exactly.
Right, rather than hunting for them. But from a clinic perspective, we get so many practitioners and shoe stores telling us that they get stopped in the street by patients thanking them for the product. Mm-hmm. So the referral rate, is incredible. Mm-hmm. We did the U.S. military special forces one time at a SOMA military medical convention, and what astounded me was that the soldiers that came in, and I love working with soldiers, the king and queens of Suck It Up. They're all doing fine. I got no problems. Okay. I put them on a foot plate. I go, you're lying to me. I got your data, right? What's going on? The one guy says, oh, yeah, I got some shrapnel in that foot, and they took a bone out of the other one. I said, really? But you're just fine. But what got me was the first time that we actually charged over, from 3 years to soldiers. I think it was a $50 special at the shows, and we did EMG testing with them as well on the two lower leg muscles, the two of them, and they had on the foot plate, a shifting to 50-50 weight balance on each side, an average of 48% reduction in that postural sway after 300 steps, and a 34% increase of activation of the lower legs.
Yeah.
Exciting stuff.
Absolutely.
But that wasn't what got me. What got me was we had a digital printer there. We printed them off the little report. And what got me was the massive grin, the shit-ass grin they had on their face, leaving the booth with money out of their pocket, a solution, and a printout that they'll probably be sharing with everybody. I thought, how do I bottle that grin? That's what treating people is all about. And they're going to use that document, that little printout that they understand their balance just improved at the barbecue they go to or wherever, and we're going to increase the patients, the volume coming through the front door. If that patient is a long-term patient, customer retention is going to go through the roof, and they're going to come back and buy multiple insoles. So the whole thing works for everybody. The practitioner makes a higher profit, and a long-term commitment from the clients, word of mouth. But to my point, as they increase their profitability of the clinic, there's nothing wrong with improving profit through increasing results.
Positive outcomes. It's all about positive outcomes. I remember putting them on, and I immediately felt like I stood straighter.
You did?
Instantaneously. So it was really, I'm not sitting straighter right now or standing straighter. But really, just a marvelous product with a lot of clinical benefits for the patient and for the practice. So positive outcomes, happier patients, more profit. What could be better? So I want to thank you personally for coming on, sharing experience of Barefoot Science and the benefits of Barefoot Science, and I'm excited to continue to work together.
Yeah, appreciate bringing me on, and thank the audience for the time they've spent to listen to our long presentation.
Wasn't that bad? All right, Lance, we'll talk to you soon.
All right, Rich. Take care, buddy.